The lecture hall stretched wide like a crystal cave, its walls shimmering with soft blue light. Rows of seats curved upward in a half circle, each one designed for a different type of body. Some seats had extra legs for insect-like students. Others were filled with water for the aquatic species. A few were just floating platforms for the beings made of gas and light. Dae-hyun sat in a standard chair near the back, his human frame fitting awkwardly in the space meant for taller aliens. Next to him, Hana tapped her fingers on her datapad, her dark eyes scanning the holographic notes floating in front of them. They were two of only 5 humans in the entire Galactic Confederation University, and most days, they felt like specimens in a zoo. Professor Velthar entered through the main archway, his crystalline body catching the light and throwing rainbow patterns across the floor. He was tall, easily 3 meters, with a body that looked like it was carved from living diamond. His species, the Siberians, were herbivores who evolved on a planet covered in vast fungal forests. They were known for their rigid thinking and their pride in academic achievement. "Good morning, students," Velthar's voice chimed like wind through glass tubes. "Today we continue our survey of newly inducted species into the Confederation. We will discuss the dietary classifications and evolutionary adaptations of species 7842, commonly known as humans." Dae-hyun felt his stomach tighten. Hana stopped tapping and looked up, her expression turning wary. The professor waved one of his crystalline appendages, and a massive hologram appeared in the center of the room. It showed a rotating image of a human body, stripped down to show muscles and bones. The skeleton glowed white against the dark display. "As you can see," Velthar continued, his tone carrying the confidence of someone who had never been wrong, "humans are clearly designed for a plant-based diet. Note the flat molars, perfect for grinding vegetation. Observe the relatively weak jaw muscles, unsuited for tearing tough animal hide." Around the lecture hall, students from dozens of different worlds took notes. A 4-armed Pelthian nodded its triangular head. A floating wisp creature pulsed with interest. Even Crix, the gelatinous blob who usually slept through lectures, seemed to be paying attention. Velthar zoomed in on the human mouth. "These small pointed teeth here are vestigial structures, left over from a distant ancestor. They serve no real purpose in modern humans. My research indicates that humans primarily consume leaves, roots, and cultivated grains. They are essentially advanced leaf eaters." Hana's hand clenched into a fist on her desk. Dae-hyun touched her arm gently, shaking his head. "Not yet." "Furthermore," the professor continued, clearly enjoying his lecture, "humans lack the robust digestive systems of true omnivores. They cannot process raw meat without becoming ill. They have no natural weapons, no claws, no venom, no armored skin. They are by all measurements a weak species that survived through agricultural development and pack cooperation." A ripple of amusement passed through the alien students. The Kryn section, filled with massive reptilian warriors, made a series of clicking sounds that Dae-hyun had learned meant laughter. To them, humans must seem like walking prey animals. The hologram changed to show early human settlements, small villages surrounded by farms. As you can observe, humans spent most of their development growing plants. This pastoral existence shaped their evolution. They became docile, cooperative, and dependent on cultivation for survival. Dae-hyun felt heat rising in his chest. Every word from Velthar's mouth was either wrong or a dangerous half-truth. Humans weren't docile, they weren't weak, and they certainly weren't just leaf eaters. "Professor," Hana's voice cut through the lecture hall like a knife. She stood up, her small human frame dwarfed by the towering seats around her. "That information is incorrect." The entire hall went silent. Students turned to stare. Professor Velthar's crystalline face somehow managed to convey annoyance despite having no traditional features. "I beg your pardon." His voice had lost its chiming quality and now sounded more like grinding rocks. "Your classification is wrong," Hana said, her voice steady. "Humans are omnivores. We eat both plants and meat. We've been hunters for millions of years. Those teeth you called vestigial? They're canines and we use them. Our digestive systems can handle raw meat if needed, though we prefer to cook it." Velthar made a sound like shattering ice, which Dae-hyun recognized as Siberian laughter. "Young human, I have been teaching xenobiology for 40 standard years. I have 3 advanced degrees from the Confederation Science Academy. I have read every available report on your species. I think I know more about human biology than you do." "But you don't," Hana insisted. "You're teaching lies. I am teaching facts, Velthar said, his voice going cold. Facts compiled by expert researchers, peer-reviewed by the Confederation's finest minds. If you cannot accept scientific consensus, perhaps you do not belong in this institution. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Hana's face flushed red, but she slowly sat down. Around them, alien students whispered to each other in dozens of languages. Daehyun watched the professor return to his lecture, explaining how humans were best suited for agricultural planets and support roles in the Confederation. His words painted humanity as gentle farmers, useful but unremarkable, certainly not dangerous or worthy of respect. When the lecture finally ended, students filed out in clusters, still discussing the leaf-eater humans. Daehyun and Hana waited until most of the crowd had gone. That arrogant crystal wants to make us look like rabbits, Hana muttered, shoving her datapad into her bag. We should report him to the administration. They'll side with him, Daehyun said quietly. He's right about one thing. He does have all the credentials. We're just students, new species. Nobody will believe us over him. So what do? Let him spread this garbage? Daehyun looked down at the lecture floor where Velthar's hologram had displayed the human body. An idea was forming in his mind, something that would require courage and probably get him into trouble. We show them the truth, he said. How? I don't know yet, but I'll think of something. They walked out of the lecture hall together into the university's main corridor, a vast space filled with floating platforms and gravity-defying architecture. Students of every imaginable shape and size moved through the area, going to their next classes. Daehyun's mind was already working on a plan. Professor Velthar had made one critical mistake. He had assumed that humans would accept his false classification quietly. He had assumed they were as docile as he claimed. That night, in the small dormitory module assigned to human students, Daehyun lay awake thinking. On Earth, his grandfather had been a butcher, working in the traditional way, understanding every cut of meat, every part of an animal. His grandfather used to say that humans had a relationship with meat that went back to the beginning of time, back to when their ancestors first picked up stones and became hunters. We're not just survivors, his grandfather would say while working. We're apex predators who learn to farm. Ever forget that? Daehyun smiled in the darkness. Professor Velthar was about to learn what humans really were, and it was going to be a lesson the entire university would remember. The next morning, Daehyun stood outside Professor Velthar's office, his heart beating faster than normal. The door was made of the same crystalline material as the professor himself, and through it, Daehyun could see distorted shapes moving inside. He pressed the communication panel. A moment later, the door chimed and slid open. "Enter," came Velthar's voice. The office was sparse and cold, with shelves carved directly into the crystal walls. Academic awards floated in stasis fields, spinning slowly to display every angle. Velthar sat behind a desk that seemed to grow from the floor itself, reviewing documents on a holographic screen. "Mr. Daehyun," the professor said without looking up, "I wondered if you would come to apologize for your friend's outburst yesterday." "I'm not here to apologize," Daehyun said, keeping his voice respectful but firm. "I'm here to request an opportunity." Now Velthar looked up, his crystalline features catching the light. "An opportunity? You made several incorrect statements about human biology and dietary habits in your lecture. I would like the chance to correct them. In front of the class." The office fell silent except for the soft hum of the environmental systems. Then Velthar made that ice-shattering sound again, his version of laughter. "You want to correct me? A first-year student wants to correct a professor with 4 decades of experience?" "Yes, sir. Because with respect, your experience doesn't matter if your information is wrong." Velthar leaned back, and Daehyun could sense the professor's amusement mixed with irritation. "Very well. I will give you 10 minutes at the beginning of next week's lecture. You may present your evidence, and the class will judge whether your claims have merit. Thank you, Professor." "Don't thank me yet, young human. Academic reputation is built on evidence and demonstration, not on emotional protests. If you cannot prove your claims, you will only reinforce my classification. The entire university will know that humans are exactly what I said they are." Daehyun met the professor's gaze steadily. "I understand." As he left the office, Daehyun felt his hands trembling slightly. He had just committed himself to something big. Something that could either change how humans were seen in the Confederation or make them look foolish. He found Hana in the university's central garden, a massive biodome that recreated environments from dozens of worlds. She was sitting under a tree from Earth, one of the few things that made the alien campus feel slightly like home. I talked to Velthar, Daehyun said, sitting down next to her. Hana looked at him with surprise. And? He's giving me 10 minutes in the next lecture to present evidence. That's great. We can put together a presentation with historical data, scientific studies from Earth, maybe some video footage of... No, Daehyun interrupted. He won't care about videos or data. He's seen all that already and dismissed it. He thinks his interpretation is correct. We need something else. Like what? Daehyun hesitated, then said, something they can't ignore. Something real and immediate. Hana studied his face. What are you planning? I'm still working on it, but I need to talk to Taemin first. They found Taemin in the engineering lab, surrounded by floating tools and holographic blueprints. He was working on some kind of propulsion system, his hands moving quickly as he adjusted tiny components. Hey, Taemin said, noticing them. He pushed his dark hair out of his eyes. What's going on? Daehyun explained the situation. Taemin listened carefully, his engineering mind already processing the problem. So you need to prove humans are omnivores, not herbivores, in a way that's undeniable, Taemin summarized. In front of the whole class. Exactly. And you can't just show them pictures or data because Velthar will claim his sources are better. Right. Taemin thought for a moment, then grinned. You need a live demonstration. That's what I was thinking. Okay, so what do humans do that pure herbivores can't? Taemin started pacing, thinking out loud. We eat meat. We digest it. We've been doing it for millions of years, so you need to show them that directly. Hana's eyes widened. You're not saying what I think you're saying. Daehyun nodded slowly. I'm going to eat meat. In front of them. Raw meat. That's crazy, Hana said. You'll get sick. Not if it's prepared properly, Taemin said, his engineering mind shifting to the practical problem. We need fresh meat properly stored. The university commissary has a protein synthesizer that can create Earth-standard beef. It's meant for our dietary needs anyway. But raw? Hana protested. Even on Earth, people don't usually eat raw beef. Some do, Daehyun said. Steak tartare, carpaccio yuko. My grandfather used to tell me about eating raw liver when he was young. Humans can handle it if the meat is fresh and clean. It's risky, Hana said. So is letting the entire Confederation think we're weak plant eaters, Daehyun replied. If we want respect, we have to show them what we really are. Over the next few days, word spread through the university that a human student was going to challenge Professor Velthar's lecture. The news traveled fast through the student networks. By the time the weekend arrived, everyone was talking about it. Students Daehyun barely knew would stop him in the corridors. A Pelthian student asked if humans really ate animal flesh. A group of wisp creatures followed him for an hour, their curious energy fields pulsing with questions. Most interesting was when Vorath approached him. The Kryn warrior was massive, easily 2.5 meters tall with scales like armor plates and eyes that burned like coals. The Kryn were apex predators from a death world, and they had little patience for weakness. Human. Vorath's voice rumbled like distant thunder. I hear you challenge the crystal professor. Yes, Daehyun said, trying not to show how intimidating he found the massive reptilian. Good. He speaks nonsense about many species. He called my people primitive brutes because we hunt our food. I will watch your demonstration. If you prove him wrong, I will respect your kind. After Vorath left, Hana whistled low. You just got the attention of one of the most dangerous students on campus. Great. No pressure. The night before the lecture, Taemin delivered a sealed container to Daehyun's quarters. Inside was a perfect cut of beef fresh from the protein synthesizer, kept at exactly the right temperature. It's safe, Taemin assured him. I ran every test. No bacteria, no parasites, nothing that will make you sick. As far as raw meat goes, this is as safe as it gets. Daehyun looked at the red meat, and memories of his grandfather's butcher shop flooded back. The smell of the place, the careful way his grandfather worked with each cut, the respect he had for the animals that provided the meat. You don't have to do this, Hana said quietly. She had come with Taemin. We can find another way. No, Daehyun said. This is the right way. Tomorrow, Professor Velthar is going to learn that humans are more than he thinks. They all are. That night, Daehyun barely slept. He kept thinking about what he was about to do, about how the aliens would react, about whether this would work or backfire completely. But he also thought about Earth, about humanity's long journey from the African plains to the stars. Humans weren't the strongest species. They weren't the fastest or the most intelligent. But they were survivors. They were adaptable. They were hunters who became farmers, warriors who became diplomats, killers who learned to be kind. And tomorrow, one lecture hall full of aliens was going to see that truth up close. The lecture hall was packed. Every seat was filled, and students who couldn't find seats floated near the ceiling or pressed against the walls. News of the demonstration had spread through the entire university, and now it seemed like half the student body had crammed into the space to watch. Daehyun stood in the corridor outside, holding the sealed container. His hands were steady, but his heart hammered in his chest. Through the transparent doors, he could see the massive crowd, hear the buzzing of dozens of different languages as students speculated about what was going to happen. Last chance to back out, Hana said beside him. She had insisted on coming early to support him. I'm not backing out. I know. Just wanted to give you the option. She smiled. Go show them what humans are made of. The doors opened and Daehyun walked into the hall. The noise dropped slightly as students noticed him, then surged back up as they pointed and whispered. He made his way down the steps to the main floor, where Professor Velthar waited with his arms crossed, his crystalline body reflecting the lights like a living prism. Mr. Daehyun? The professor's voice chimed out, amplified so everyone could hear. I see you've brought quite an audience for your presentation. I hope you can provide evidence worthy of their time. I'll do my best, Professor. Velthar gestured to the center of the demonstration area. The floor is yours. 10 minutes. Daehyun walked to the center and placed his container on the table there. The crowd leaned forward with interest. He took a breath and began. Thank you, Professor Velthar, for this opportunity. I'm here today to correct some serious misunderstandings about human biology and dietary classification. He activated the holographic display, showing an image of early humans on the African savanna. Humans evolved as persistence hunters. We didn't have claws or venom or armored skin, but we had something else, endurance. We could run for hours, tracking wounded prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. A few students made sounds of interest. The Kryn section, including Vorath, watched intently. Our bodies are built for this. We have advanced cooling systems. We sweat to regulate temperature during long hunts. Our legs are designed for distance running. Our brains developed to track prey over vast distances, to plan and coordinate complex hunting strategies. He changed the image to show human teeth. Professor Velthar called our canines vestigial. They're not. They're functional teeth designed for tearing meat. Yes, they're smaller than a pure carnivore's teeth because we're not pure carnivores. We're omnivores. We eat everything. Interesting theory, Velthar interrupted, his voice dripping with condescension. But I notice you're still just showing pictures and making claims. Where is your evidence? Where is your proof? Daehyun nodded slowly. You want proof. Something undeniable. Something that herbivores cannot do. Exactly. Very well. Daehyun opened the sealed container. The smell of fresh meat wafted out into the lecture hall. Several students recoiled. The herbivorous species made sounds of disgust, but the carnivorous species leaned forward with sudden, sharp interest. Inside the container was a thick cut of raw beef, red and fresh, prepared exactly to Earth standards. The lecture hall fell completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop in that vast space. This is beef, Daehyun explained, his voice calm. Muscle tissue from cattle, an animal we domesticated on Earth. Humans have been eating beef for thousands of years, cooked mostly, but also raw. Surely you're not suggesting, Velthar started. Daehyun picked up the raw steak with his bare hands. It was cold and smooth, the fat marbling through the red muscle. He lifted it to his mouth. Young human, I must protest this. Daehyun bit into the raw meat. His teeth sank into the flesh, tearing off a chunk. The taste exploded in his mouth, iron and salt and something primal. He chewed deliberately, letting everyone in the hall see, and then swallowed. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Half the students made sounds of shock and horror. A Pelthian student actually fainted, its forearms going limp. The aquatic species in their water tanks churned the liquid with their distress. Several wisp creatures flickered and dimmed, but the carnivorous species had different reactions. The Kryn section erupted in clicking approval. Farath stood up, his massive form rising above the other students, and roared what sounded like respect. Daehyun took another bite, chewing calmly while chaos swirled around him. He swallowed again, then spoke into the amplifier. Herbivores cannot do this. A pure plant eater would get sick from raw meat. Their digestive systems aren't designed for it. But humans can. We have stomach acid strong enough to break down raw flesh. We have enzymes that process animal proteins. We have bacteria in our guts that help digest meat. He took one more bite, then set the rest down. For most of human history, we ate raw meat when we had to. We developed cooking because it made meat safer and easier to digest, not because we needed it to survive. Our ancestors ate raw liver, raw fish, raw bone marrow. We still do in some cultures. Yuko in Korea, carpaccio in Italy, steak tartare in France. Professor Velthar's crystalline form seemed to have lost some of its shine. His voice when he spoke lacked its earlier confidence. This is barbaric. No, Daehyun said firmly. This is nature. This is evolution. This is what humans are. We're not just leaf eaters, Professor. We're omnivores. We're hunters. We're survivors who can eat almost anything to stay alive. He wiped his mouth and continued. You said we were weak. You said we had no natural weapons. But you were wrong. Our weapon is adaptability. We can eat plants or meat. We can survive in frozen tundra or burning deserts. We can run marathons or sprint short distances. We can climb, swim, throw with accuracy over long distances. We're not specialized for one environment or one food source. We're generalists, and that makes us dangerous. Crix, the gelatinous student, pulsed with a question. But why would you develop this way? Most species specialize. Because Earth is cruel, Daehyun answered. Our planet went through ice ages and heat waves. Forests became grasslands, grasslands became deserts. Food sources appeared and disappeared. Species that specialized died out. Humans survived because we could adapt. When plants were scarce, we hunted. When hunting was poor, we gathered. When both failed, we learned to farm. We bent the world to our needs instead of waiting for the world to accommodate us. He looked directly at Professor Velthar. You called us docile and weak because you saw our farms and our cooperation. But you missed the context. We farm because we conquered our entire planet. We cooperate because we hunted in packs. We're peaceful now because we can afford to be. But never mistake peace for weakness. The lecture hall was completely silent now. Every student was staring at Daehyun, seeing him in a new light. The small human who had seemed so harmless suddenly looked different, dangerous, capable. Voreth's voice rumbled across the hall. The human speaks truth. I have studied Earth's history. Humans drove countless species to extinction. They hunted animals 10 times their size. They survived disasters that would have ended most civilizations. They split the atom and touched the stars. They are not leaf eaters. They are apex predators who learned to be civilized. Other voices joined in, students discussing and debating. The carnivorous species were nodding with approval. Even some of the herbivorous species seemed thoughtful rather than dismissive. Professor Velthar stood motionless for a long moment. Finally he spoke. This demonstration was certainly memorable. I will need to review my source materials. It wasn't an apology, but it was an admission. The great Professor Velthar, who had never been wrong, was admitting he needed to reconsider. Daehyun bowed respectfully. Thank you for the opportunity, Professor. As he walked back to his seat, students parted to let him through. Some looked at him with fear, others with respect, many with fascination. Hana grabbed his arm when he reached her, her eyes shining. That was incredible, she whispered. Daehyun sat down, his hands still slightly greasy from the meat. His stomach felt fine. The raw beef was already digesting without any problems, just like it should. He had proven his point. Humans weren't leaf eaters. They weren't weak or docile or harmless. They were survivors, hunters, and omnivores who had clawed their way to the top of Earth's food chain and then reached for the stars. And now, the galaxy knew it too. The video appeared on the Galactic network within hours. Someone had recorded Daehyun's demonstration and uploaded it with the title, Human Student Eats Raw Meat in Front of Horrified Aliens. By evening, it had 10 million views. By the next morning, 50 million. By the end of the week, it was one of the most watched videos in Confederation space. Daehyun became famous overnight. though not in the way he had expected. Students he had never met would stop him in the corridors asking questions or just staring. Some wanted to know if all humans could eat raw meat. Others asked if humans really hunted animals on Earth. A few asked if he would do it again. The reactions varied wildly by species. Herbivorous species generally seemed disturbed or frightened. Several plant-eating students started avoiding the human dormitory area altogether, but carnivorous and omnivorous species had different views. The Kryn warriors started treating Dae-hyun and the other humans with open respect. A group of Moravian insectoids who hunted in swarms on their homeworld invited the humans to join their social group. Hana found it hilarious. "You've become the scary human," she told Dae-hyun as they walked through the campus gardens. "Half the university thinks you're going to eat them." "That's not funny," Dae-hyun said, but he couldn't help smiling a little. "It's a little funny." Taemin caught up with them, his datapad glowing with notifications. "Have you seen the forums? There are entire discussion threads analyzing your demonstration. Some xenobiologists are calling it the most important moment in human-alien relations since first contact. Some are calling it barbaric," Dae-hyun reminded him. "Well, yeah, but controversy means people are paying attention." The controversy became official 3 days after the demonstration when Dae-hyun received a formal summons to appear before the university tribunal. Professor Velthar had filed a complaint claiming that Dae-hyun's actions were inappropriate, disturbing to other students, and violated the university's code of conduct regarding respectful academic discourse. "He's trying to get you expelled," Hana said, reading the summons over Dae-hyun's shoulder. "Maybe I deserve it," Dae-hyun said quietly. "I did traumatize a lot of students. You told the truth. There's nothing wrong with that." But Dae-hyun wasn't so sure. In the days leading up to the tribunal, he couldn't shake the feeling that maybe he had gone too far. Yes, he had proven his point about human biology, but at what cost? Students were afraid of him now. The university's peaceful atmosphere had been disrupted. Maybe Velthar was right to file a complaint. The tribunal was held in one of the university's formal chambers, a circular room with seats arranged in tiers around a central floor. 5 professors from different species sat in judgment, with the dean presiding. The dean was a Vorthian, a species that looked like floating brain matter protected by a crystalline shell. Professor Velthar sat on one side with his legal representative. Dae-hyun sat on the other, feeling very small and very alone. This tribunal is convened to hear the complaint filed by Professor Velthar against student Dae-hyun regarding conduct during an academic lecture. The dean's voice echoed through the chamber. "Professor, please present your case." Velthar stood, his crystalline form gleaming in the chamber's light. "Thank you, Dean. My complaint is simple. The student Dae-hyun engaged in shocking and disturbing behavior during my lecture. He consumed raw animal flesh in front of dozens of students, many of whom were traumatized by the display. Several students required counseling afterward. One student fainted and had to receive medical attention. The professor's representative, a sharp-featured Pelthian lawyer, added, "We argue that this behavior violated University Code Section 12.7, which prohibits conduct designed to shock or disturb other students. We also cite Section 15.2, which requires respectful discourse in academic settings." The tribunal members made notes on their datapads. One of them, an elderly Severian like Velthar, nodded in agreement. "Student Dae-hyun," the dean said, "do you have representation?" "No, Dean, I'll speak for myself." "Very well. How do you respond to these charges?" Dae-hyun stood, his legs feeling shaky. He had prepared a speech, but now, facing the tribunal, the words seemed inadequate. "I did eat raw meat during Professor Velthar's lecture," he began. "I won't deny that. And I understand that it disturbed some students. But I didn't do it to shock people or to be disrespectful. I did it to correct dangerous misinformation." "Misinformation?" The elderly Severian professor spoke up. "Professor Velthar is one of our most respected xenobiologists. With respect, Professor, being respected doesn't mean being right. Professor Velthar told his entire class that humans were herbivores, that we were weak, that we were docile leaf eaters with vestigial teeth. Every part of that was wrong. He was teaching lies about my species." "So you traumatized other students to prove a point?" Velthar's lawyer asked sharply. "I demonstrated the truth about human biology. Is that wrong? Should I have stayed quiet and let everyone in the Confederation believe humans are something we're not?" Before anyone could respond, the chamber doors opened. Vorath walked in, his massive Kryn frame dominating the space. Behind him came three other students, a Moravian hunter, a Pelthian merchant, and surprisingly, Crix the gelatinous observer. "Dean," Vorath rumbled, "we request permission to speak on behalf of the human student." The dean's crystalline shell pulsed with surprise. "This is highly unusual. This is not a trial, it's an academic tribunal. Nevertheless, we have relevant testimony." The dean consulted with the other tribunal members, then nodded. "Very well. You may speak, but briefly." Vorath moved to stand beside Daehyun. "I am Vorath, Kryn warrior and third-year student. I watched the humans' demonstration. It was not barbaric. It was educational. Professor Velthar made the same errors about my species when we joined the Confederation. He called us primitive because we hunt. He dismissed our culture as savage. The humans' demonstration showed what many of us already know. Being a hunter does not make you primitive. Being a carnivore does not make you barbaric." The Moravian hunter clicked forward. "I agree. My species hunts in swarms. We consume prey alive, yet we are also poets and engineers. The human showed that eating meat is natural for some species. There is no shame in it." Crix pulsed forward, their gelatinous body rippling. "I was confused by the demonstration at first. But then I researched human history. I learned about their evolutionary path. The human student taught us more about his species in 10 minutes than weeks of Professor Velthar's lectures. That is good teaching, not bad conduct." The Pelthian merchant spoke last. "I come from a trading family. We deal with many species. Understanding what others truly are is essential. The human gave us truth. That has value even if it was uncomfortable." The tribunal chamber buzzed with discussion. The dean consulted quietly with the other professors. Finally, the dean spoke. "We will take a brief recess to deliberate." The wait felt like hours, though it was only 30 minutes. Daehyun sat with his unexpected supporters, feeling grateful and overwhelmed. "Thank you," he told Vorath. "You didn't have to do this." "Yes, I did," the Kryn warrior replied. "You showed courage. My people respect that. Besides, Velthar needs to learn that not all species fit his narrow categories." When the tribunal reconvened, the dean's voice was formal and measured. "We have reached our decision. After reviewing the evidence and hearing testimony, we find that student Daehyun did not violate university conduct codes. His demonstration, while shocking to some, was educational in nature and directly relevant to the academic discussion. It was not intended to harm or traumatize, but to correct factual errors. Velthar's crystalline form seemed to dim slightly. However," the dean continued, "we also find that Professor Velthar's lectures contained significant factual inaccuracies regarding human biology and dietary classification. These errors caused harm to the university's human students and spread misinformation throughout the student body." Now Velthar stood. "Dean, I must protest. The tribunal's decision is final, Professor. You are required to issue a formal correction to your lectures and attend sensitivity training regarding newly inducted species. You will also be required to consult with representatives from any species before lecturing about their biology and culture." The tribunal adjourned. As students filed out, many came up to congratulate Daehyun. Even some of the herbivorous students who had been disturbed by his demonstration admitted it had been educational. Professor Velthar left without speaking to anyone, his crystalline form seeming somehow smaller than before. Outside the tribunal chamber, Hana hugged Daehyun tightly. "You did it. You actually won," Taemin grinned. "The scary human strikes again?" But Daehyun didn't feel like he had won anything. He had proven his point, yes. He had corrected the misinformation. But he had also learned something important about the galaxy. There were many species out here, all with different views, different biologies, different ways of understanding the universe. And if humans wanted respect, they would have to keep teaching, keep demonstrating, keep showing the galaxy what they really were. Not with violence or aggression, but with truth and courage and the willingness to be misunderstood. 2 weeks after the tribunal, life at the university began to settle into a new rhythm. Daehyun was still famous, but the initial shock had faded. Students no longer stopped him in every corridor, though some still asked questions about Earth and human culture. The video of his demonstration continued to circulate across the galactic network, spawning countless discussions about human nature and the complexity of species classifications. What surprised Daehyun most was how many students now sought him out for genuine conversation. A Pelthian biology student asked him to guest lecture about human evolutionary history. A group of wisp creatures invited him to a cultural exchange session. Even some of the herbivorous students who had initially been horrified approached him with careful questions about Earth's ecology and human hunting practices. The biggest change came from Professor Velthar himself. The professor had issued his formal correction as required, acknowledging errors in his classification of humans. The correction was dry and academic, lacking any personal apology, but it was an official admission that he had been wrong. For someone as proud as Velthar, that was significant. One afternoon, Daehyun received an unexpected message on his datapad. It was an invitation to a cross-species feast, organized by the university's cultural committee. The message specifically mentioned that human students were encouraged to bring traditional foods from Earth to share. "Are you going?" Taemin asked when Daehyun showed him the invitation. "I think so. It might be good. What will you bring?" Daehyun thought for a moment, then smiled. "Korean barbecue. Properly cooked this time." The feast was held in the university's largest gathering hall, a massive space with environmental controls that could accommodate dozens of different atmospheric needs. Tables were arranged throughout the room, each hosting foods from different worlds. The air was filled with strange and wonderful smells, some appetizing, others completely alien. Daehyun and Taemin arrived with carefully prepared galbi, the beef ribs marinated in soy sauce, garlic sugar and sesame oil, then grilled to perfection. They also brought bulgogi, thinly sliced beef in a sweet and savory marinade. Hana had contributed kimchi and various banchan, the small side dishes that accompanied Korean meals. The human table drew immediate attention. Students from various species approached cautiously, curious about the cooked meat that smelled so different from the raw flesh Daehyun had eaten during his demonstration. "Is it safe?" a nervous Pelthian student asked. "Completely safe," Daehyun assured them. "Cooking kills any bacteria and makes the meat easier to digest. This is how humans usually eat meat. The raw demonstration was just to prove a point about our biology." A brave Moravian hunter was the first to try the galbi. Their compound eyes widened with surprise. "This is delicious. The cooking process adds flavor?" "Yes. We've been cooking food for hundreds of thousands of years. It's not just about safety. It's about taste, culture, and bringing people together." More students tried the food. Even some herbivores, carefully avoiding the meat itself, sampled the kimchi and other vegetable dishes. The fermented cabbage particularly interested a group of fungus-based life forms who appreciated the complex bacterial cultures involved in fermentation. Vorath approached the table, his massive form towering over the human students. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the galbi. "Please," Daehyun said, offering him a plate. The Kryn warrior took a piece of the grilled beef and ate it carefully. For a moment he was silent. Then he made a deep rumbling sound that Daehyun had learned meant pleasure or approval. "This is excellent," Vorath said. "On my world we eat meat raw because our planet is harsh and fire is rare. But I see the value in your cooking. It transforms the food into something new. Would you like to try more?" Hana offered him the bulgogi. Vorath sampled several dishes, asking questions about the preparation and ingredients. Other Kryn students, seeing their warrior scholar's approval, joined him at the human table. Soon there was a crowd of carnivorous and omnivorous species all trying Korean barbecue for the first time. "You humans are hunters who became chefs," one Kryn warrior observed. "You took killing and transformed it into art." Daehyun had never thought of it that way, but the description felt accurate. Humans had indeed transformed their hunting heritage into elaborate culinary traditions. Every culture on Earth had its own ways of preparing meat, vegetables, grains, and everything else they could gather or grow. Across the hall, Daehyun noticed Professor Velthar standing alone near a table of crystallized nutrients meant for Severian metabolism. The professor looked out of place, his rigid, crystalline form at odds with the warm social atmosphere of the feast. "I'll be right back," Daehyun told his friends. He walked over to Velthar, carrying a small plate of grilled vegetables and rice. The professor noticed him approaching and seemed to brace himself for confrontation. "Professor," Daehyun said respectfully, "would you like to try some Earth food? These are just vegetables, no meat. Grilled peppers, mushrooms, and onions with steamed rice." Velthar looked at the offered plate with suspicion.
"Why would you offer me food, student?"
"I tried to have you expelled." You did what you thought was right based on the information you had, and now you've issued a correction. That takes courage too. The professor was silent for a long moment. Then slowly he reached out and took a small portion of the grilled vegetables. Severians could absorb certain types of prepared plant matter. Though it wasn't their primary food source, it's adequate, Velthar said, which from him was probably high praise. I'm glad. You know, Professor, I didn't do the demonstration to humiliate you. I did it because humans need to be understood correctly. We're new to the Confederation and first impressions matter. I see that now, Velthar admitted grudgingly. I have spent the past weeks reviewing Earth's biological and cultural records more thoroughly. Your species is more complex than I initially assessed. All species are complex, Dahyun said. That's what makes the galaxy interesting. Perhaps. Velthar paused, then added, I should not have been so dismissive of your friend's objection in class. That was unprofessional of me. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was closer than Dahyun had expected. Thank you for saying that, Professor. They stood in awkward silence for a moment, then Velthar asked, The other food on your table, the meat preparations, are those common on Earth? Very common. Would you like me to explain Korean barbecue culture? I suppose that would be educational. Dahyun led the professor back to the human table and began explaining the history and tradition of Korean barbecue. He talked about how families gathered around grills, how the meat was marinated sometimes for days, how each region of Korea had its own variations and preferences. Velthar listened intently, occasionally asking surprisingly insightful questions about the cultural significance of shared meals. Other students gathered to listen, and soon Dahyun found himself giving an impromptu lecture about human food culture. He talked about how humans had taken ingredients from every environment they lived in and created thousands of distinct cuisines. He explained how food was tied to identity, tradition, celebration, and comfort. On Earth, Dahyun said, we have a saying, breaking bread together. It means sharing a meal creates understanding between people. Even enemies can become friends over food. Crix pulsed with interest. So humans use food as a social bonding mechanism? Exactly. It's not just about nutrition. It's about connection. The feast continued late into the evening. Students from dozens of species shared their traditional foods and stories. A group of aquatic beings demonstrated their method of filtering nutrients from water while adding flavorful minerals. The wisp creatures created light patterns that represented their energy consumption rituals. The Kryn warriors performed a traditional hunting chant before eating, and at the human table, students kept coming back for more Korean barbecue. Daehyun, Hana, and Taemin found themselves cooking in shifts, grilling more meat as the supplies ran low. They taught interested students how to use the chopsticks, how to wrap the meat in lettuce leaves with rice and sauce, how to appreciate the different flavors. Near the end of the evening, Vorath approached Daehyun one more time. The massive Kryn warrior had a serious expression on his reptilian face. Human Daehyun, he said formally, I wish to make a declaration. You have shown your species to be worthy of respect. You are hunters who chose peace but who remember their nature. My clan wishes to establish friendship with your human group. We'd be honored, Daehyun said, genuinely moved. Then it is done. Any human may call upon the Kryn for aid and we will answer. This is our oath. After Vorath left, Hana whistled softly. Do you realize what just happened? You just formed an alliance with one of the most powerful warrior species in the Confederation. I just wanted them to understand us, Daehyun said. Well, they understand now. We all do. As the feast wound down and students began leaving, Daehyun stood for a moment looking around the hall. Just weeks ago, he had been an unknown student, one of 5 humans in a university of thousands. He had been dismissed as a weak leaf eater, a primitive newcomer to the